Finishers are some of the most exciting, satisfying moments in all of professional wrestling. Whether it's a conclusion to a match, a sneak attack, or a setup for a crowd-popping last-second kickout, finishing moves are some of the most fun we fans have watching the show. But not all finishers are good. Some of them are even terrible. Here is our list of famous WWE wrestlers who tried a different finisher, starting with Seth Rollins, the Pedigree.
Seth Rollins! Pedigree! It's Seth Rollins! It's Seth Rollins! A pedigree!
Aside from the move being so closely linked to the legendary Triple H, it always looked weird when Rollins hit it. Triple H is a big, chunky man who looks like he'd bring the opponent down with some force with his pedigree. Rollins, who is naturally much smaller than Triple H, looked like he was performing the move far too gently, even when he put all of his weight into it. The curb stomp is the perfect finisher for Rollins. It looks brutal and can be done to anyone of any size. The pedigree just kinda looked dumb. Seth Rollins, the ripcord knee.
That was an old Triple H move. Boom. Oh, there it is, that ripcord knee from Rollins.
So after defeating Triple H at WrestleMania, Rollins decided that he wanted to be his own performer and have his own moveset. Out with the pedigree, in with the ripcord knee. This move looks awesome and is at least somewhat legitimately dangerous as Rollins smashed John Cena's nose through his skull with it, legitimately breaking Cena's nose. The problem with the ripcord knee is although it looks badass, it never really felt like a finisher. A signature move? Sure. A transitional move? Absolutely. But as a finisher, when the fans already had to suffer through Rollins' pedigree and clamored for the return of the curb stomp, the ripcord knee just wasn't scratching the itch. The Rock, the shoulder breaker.
Shoulder breaker.
Technically known as Rocky Maivia during this period, when The Rock first showed up in WWE in 1996, he was using the shoulder breaker as a finisher. As a transitional move, or a move to target a kayfabe injured shoulder, it's great. As a finisher though, it looks really weak, especially considering how similar it is to the running power slam, which fans were already familiar with due to the British Bulldog. It was hard to make sense of the move, as there aren't many other shoulder-based attacks within wrestling kayfabe. When someone gets slammed onto their head or their back, it makes sense that they stay down. But the shoulder? Of course, The Rock later came back in a big way with the Rock Bottom and the People's Elbow duo, both of which becoming standalone finishers in their own right.
The Rock stalking past Rock Bottom. It's Sports Entertainment Today. Oh, the People's Elbow.
Randy Orton, the Overdrive, or the Ozone.
They kind of fell apart. Yeah. Oh! The Orton, look at this! What the hell was that?
This strange move was tried by a variety of superstars in the 2000s. Carlito tried to make it his finisher, and a few short years later, MVP was testing it out too. Neither of those guys wound up hanging on to it, but the first to try it in WWE in the 2000s was the future legend killer, Randy Orton. The Overdrive is actually a pretty fun move, and when done properly, it does look effective. That said, when we look at the body of work the RKO has on its resume, it's an absolute godsend that Orton retired the Overdrive.
Be kidding me! How did he do it?
Shawn Michaels, the Teardrop Suplex.
Now that's not fast here. Hitman Red Arm, take it down. Not over there. Suplex.
What the hell is this? Look, Shawn Michaels took a transitional move, the super kick, and turned it into one of the greatest finishers of all time. He made it such a legend that to this day, countless wrestlers around the world use it as a signature move or a finisher in almost every match. I am of course not talking about the teardrop suplex, but his iconic sweet chin music. Prior to honing in on using the sweet chin music as a finisher, Shawn Michaels was using the terribly boring teardrop suplex as his match ender. But just look at it. It's gotta be the most average suplex in wrestling history. A basic vertical suplex looks infinitely more damaging, not to mention the variety of suplexes made available by the William Regals and Samoa Joes of the world. Imagine all of HBK's iconic moments with the sweet chin music, but pretend he had to use this nonsense instead. Oh.
Wants to fight. Oh, there isn't any good. Oh, I knew he was going to do that.
The Undertaker, The Last Ride.
Last ride.
Finally a move that made sense and was completely believable. Don't get me wrong, the Tombstone Piledriver will forever be associated with the Deadman, and I was crushed that he semi-retired it during his Biker Taker days. But man, did we get a good substitute. For many big men in wrestling, the powerbomb as a finisher is a foregone conclusion. But Taker never really utilized it, at least until he put his own spin on the move. Standing already at a staggering 6 foot 10 inches, The Undertaker would then lift his opponents even higher by their waist belt and slam them down into the mat. Though the Tombstone came back in 2004 when the Deadman character returned, he held on to the last ride as a part-time finisher because god damn did it look good.
Up! Yes! You don't believe in God, did you? You better stop!
Triple H, the Pedigree Pandemonium.
Up and zoom up. Attempt. Oh my! Wow! Just watch this. Watch what? What was that? Pedigree Pandemonium.
What is this? Believe it or not, Triple H's iconic finisher, the Pedigree, wasn't his first finisher seen on WWE TV. Back in the mid-90s, Triple H used the Diamond Cutter and branded it the Pedigree Pandemonium. According to the game himself, he was never enamored with the move, and you can see this as he performs it. It looks like he's as bored as we are watching him do it. Thankfully, after a call from DDP himself asking Hunter to stop using it as a favor to him, Triple H then started using the Pedigree, a move that he had loved using prior to stepping into a WWE ring.
Ken Helmsley, the Pedigree, yes! Pedigree!
Kevin Owens, the Stunner.
Tag was made with Sami Zayn. KO wants the stunner!
Oh!
KO stunner!
The pop-up powerbomb is an awesome move. I loved how it could flow seamlessly into a match and be used as an emphatic statement finisher or an out-of-nowhere finisher. With that said, slightly undersized Kevin Owens never really looked like the right guy to be doing it. If someone like Roman Reigns or Brock Lesnar used the move, it would make sense that those powerhouses were tossing people up in the air. So Owens got Stone Cold Steve Austin's permission to start using the Stunner. At first, I thought it was silly. How can such an iconic move ever go to another superstar? But Owens has been killing it with the move and hits it with believability on opponents of all size. And I gotta admit, I missed seeing this move on my TV.
Usos, and this is just Stunner! One way! Stunner!
The Fiend, Bray Wyatt, the Mandible Claw.
Tonight with a coup de grace, but he's caught! Caught in a mandible claw!
Sister Abigail was a badass finisher in every way. It could be done on anyone, it looked brutal, and Wyatt managed to tie in a little bit of character work, kissing his opponents on the head before ripping them down to the ground. When he introduced the Fiend persona, it was meant to be an even more vicious, deranged, and violent version of Wyatt. In the 90s, vicious, deranged, and violent meant only one superstar, Mankind. Another wrestler who wore a mask and wasn't right in the head. Mankind was able to use this signature submission on any opponent at any time. It was the perfect move for him and became the perfect move for the Fiend.
Fiend with a mandible claw! Countered the RKO with a mandible claw! Wyatt using the mandible claw!
Chris Jericho, the Code Breaker.
Come on, Chris! Code breaker! Left Jericho! Oh, look at it! Code breaker!
Chris Jericho is the master of reinvention. From his ever-changing moveset to his ever-changing look, Jericho knows that old is death and new is life. Already rolling into the WWE with 2 established finishers in the Walls of Jericho and the Lion Salt, Jericho briefly brought in the Breakdown before leaving that move to become the Miz's skull-crushing finale years later. But when Y2J returned to WWE in 2007, he needed a move to accompany his new gimmick. Enter the Code Breaker. Another genius move on this list that can be done to any wrestler of any size at any time. The Code Breaker quickly became recognized as Jericho's go-to finisher, with the Walls of Jericho even taking a backseat.
After connecting, and Punk, met by Jericho! Code breaker!
That concludes our list of WWE stars who tried a new finisher. Which ones did we miss? Let us know in the comments below.